homes this evening. We introduce you to the wonderful family that owns and operates the beautiful Vineyard at Hillyland in Scotland, Connecticut. For those of you who joined us for our first 1881 series Uncorked last year, we visited the Stearns family at their vineyard. We had an incredible evening with live acoustic music, catering, and of course, a spectacular view that can't be beat. So as we deal with a world facing adversity, thanks to this global pandemic, we're trying to transplant ourselves back to the vineyard this evening, to the vineyard at Hillyland, and try to remove ourselves from the chaos and stress that many are experiencing across the globe. We'll enjoy some delectable wines with fellow Huskies tonight, and so hopefully it relieves some stress that anybody might be having this weekend. So if you're willing, I want you all to do me a quick favor before we get started and before we kick things off with Doug and Geri Stearns. If you will, I'd like you to transplant you to Scotland, Connecticut tonight. Imagine this evening that you're sitting outside at a bistro table with a glass of your soon-to-be favorite Hillyland wine, listening to an alumnus who eerily sounds like John Mayer on an acoustic guitar outside, a stone wall running outside the tasting room providing some quaintness to the environment, temperatures not quite as humid as it is tonight, about 74 degrees, sun is starting to set, and you have overhead vintage exposed cafe lights running across the patio area. Those kick on, the rolling green hills are in front of you and tree lines are wisping in light breeze. And in the immediate foreground, nothing but hillside of vines. I think that's a pretty decent description, right, Doug and Geri?
Yes, it certainly is.
So you're surrounded by your closest family and friends tonight. Some of you are out in front of fire pits right now with friends down the street that came over. Laughter is filling the room and filling the area around you, and Huskies are all around you. I think that's a pretty good environment for us to get started. So now, welcome to the Vineyard at Hillyland. Doug and Geri Stearns, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I know tonight was in fact the night that we were scheduled to come back to you for our second annual event, and due to the circumstances, that just did not happen. So we appreciate you all joining us this evening and welcoming us back into your business and into your homes. It's an incredibly beautiful vineyard, and we want to just get started tonight to get to know a little bit more about you, the vineyard, how it all came to be. We'll have some time for question and answers from our audience as well. And Doug, I guess we'll get things started with you if I can. Talk to us about your time at UConn. We know that you were a double Husky, graduate of our College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, as well as our law school. Talk to us a little bit about what your goal was when you enrolled and your majors and what you would hope to do post-graduation to kind of kick.
Sure. So I went to UConn right out of high school and got a bachelor's degree in animal science because at that time I was certain that I was going to be a dairy farmer for the rest of my life. And so I came back to the farm after college and I was running the dairy farm. And the farm has been in our family since 1970. And so I continued to milk cows. And about 9 years after graduating from college, I had a change in plans and decided to go back to law school. And so I enrolled in the UConn Law School in West Hartford and got my law degree. I went nights, so it took me 4 years. And when I started law school, I had 4 kids. And by the time, or Geri and I had 4 kids, by the time I was done with law school, we had 6 kids. And so I continued to milk cows after law school, and I just opened my own practice at that time. So I was doing both things, practicing law and running the dairy farm, and continued to do that until 2009, at which time we stopped milking cows. We sold the dairy herd, and we kept the young stock around. We sold most of the young stock by 2011. And Geri and I had started the vineyard actually in 2007. We put in our first acre of grapes and put in another acre the next year, put in about 2.5 acres the following year. And so that was on the agenda before we had stopped with the dairy farm. And then we started harvesting some grapes in 2011, making some small batches of wine, selling most of the grapes to some other vineyards. And each year we sold less of the grapes and made more into wine. And we were doing things here at the farm, trying to get ready. So we felt that the place was what we wanted to open up and March of 2017, we opened the doors and started selling wine.
Awesome. That's incredible. Can you tell me a little bit about anything from your time at UConn, anything that stood out from your experiences that helped you kind of get into that mode of wanting to create your own wine or grow grapes in that sense?
Yeah, so when I was, at UConn, I learned certainly valuable things about agriculture and horticulture practices, and also that UConn is a good resource for lots of things, for questions about different parts of agriculture, and different issues that may come up with products that you're growing, and so I learned a lot of things just about crops in general, and care for crops, and good practices for growing things.
Nothing like a good land grant institution getting you ready, right?
Definitely.
Now, for all of our participants tonight, we're going to get to know Doug and Geri, talk a little bit about their story. That's not going to preclude you from getting started on your wine if you wanted to. I realize that that's the thing you came for. Obviously, you want to make sure you can enjoy that. So feel free to dip into that. We'll talk a little bit about the tasting procedure and all the things that you want to know a little bit more about the wine and the process. But we know it's a hard thing for you to do, to hold back on all those beautiful wines in front of you. So we understand if you jump right in. Doug, another quick question. You still practice law today, though, right? And your office is right on site?
Right. My practice is in my house. I'm a solo attorney, and have a general practice. So.
How do you find the time to do that while managing a vineyard and growing countless acres of grapes? And Geri, don't get me wrong, I'm going to come to you next, but you have to be the anchor to all of this. Obviously, make sure that it happens. So, but Doug, how do you find the time?
That's definitely a challenge. Someone said the other day, said to me, well, you seem like you must be an overachiever. I said, I'm not sure I'm an overachiever, maybe just an overcommitter, but I sometimes commit myself to a lot of things, but I don't know, it's just the way that I've done things through my life, I guess. So I'm used to having a lot of things going on at the same time, and thankfully Geri's here to help me with all those things, and because it'd be impossible to do all the things we do without someone who's such a great partner.
Well, you set the table for me perfectly, and so Geri, I got to ask the next question to you. When did this fantastic woman in front of us, when did you enter the picture here, and what are the things that you would tell us about Doug that we need to know?
He sounds a little dry tonight, but he's actually very funny.
Very nice. But when did you enter the picture? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I met Doug when I was 13 years old, and my father was a square dance caller. So every Saturday night we were out square dancing, and that's where I met Doug. He was square dancing that particular night where my father was doing the calling. And his parents met square dancing, and so did my parents. So I guess it was meant to be.
So he was that good of a square dancer. He slept a lot of feet, right?
No, he's not a good dancer. So we started dating in 1979, and when I was 16, and got married in 84. So we've been together for 36 years. 36
years. Well, congratulations. That's amazing. And you said you have 6 children.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about them. Are they involved with the vineyard?
Sometimes. I mean, they have other jobs, but they're willing to step in and help us when we need it.
Okay. And we talked about this offline, but I got to ask, what school did they go to?
So 3 of them are UConn students. So then one of them is a dual UConn student like myself. So she did her undergrad there, and she also went to the UConn Dental School. And then the others went to some different colleges, the other 3.
So you've got a family or legacy family of Huskies living amongst you. Very nice.
Yes.
Very nice. We always like to hear that the Husky lineage doesn't stop with yourselves and continues on. That's great to hear. Thanks for continuing that and supporting the university in that respect by making your kids go there. Hopefully they wanted to go there.
Yeah, it was their choice for sure.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into a little bit more about the history and what about the farm. You mentioned obviously that 2007 was your start, but I know we've talked about this a few times, and obviously I visited the vineyard. Talk a little bit about the history of the farm when your family. You mentioned a little bit about this when the family came into it, and really what made you switch from the dairy farm that you mentioned earlier into the vineyard side of it.
Sure. So as I had mentioned, we came here in 1970. My father was a partner at a farm in Mansfield called Mountain Dairy. It was him and his two brothers and their father. And he sold his share of the partnership in 1970 and purchased this farm. And so he was here until his death in 1995. So again, you know, I expected I was going to be a dairy farmer forever, but that certainly changed. And what got us into the wine was I had taken Jerry on a trip out to New York in 2003 for a couple overnights, and we were out at the Hudson Valley Wine Trail, and so we were going to all the vineyards out there, and so we were noticing that several of them were old dairy farms. And so when we were at one, Jerry said, well, how come we're still milking cows instead of doing something like this? So that's when we started talking about it. And 4 years later, we put the vines in.
Awesome, that's great. Now, obviously, making that switch there, you've been open since, you said you started planting in 2007. You said 2011, I believe, was the first year when you opened.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
What year did you actually, you mentioned what year did you actually open the doors for folks to come
we
in?
opened the doors in 2017.
2017.
Yeah, so it was 10 years. It didn't have to be 10 years, but that's how long it took. So we felt we were ready.
Okay, very good. Now, Jerry, I know that this is a question that you and I talked about offline as well, and you've talked numerous times to media and such, but obviously in 2017, shortly after opening, July 4th hit you guys pretty hard in 2017. Can you talk about really that fateful night and the unimaginable that happened that night?
So we were having a picnic with all our kids and the neighbors, and we were just cleaning up, and we hadn't even put the food away yet, and my son came running in because he finally heard the fire. And it started on the backside of the barn, so that's why I wasn't noticed right away. We had numerous fire departments here, but the problem was water. We're out in the country, it's a little bit more difficult to get water to the fire. Sure. So it was a total loss. And we had converted it from a dairy barn to our winemaking facility. So all our vats of wine were there. We lost about 3,000 gallons of wine. 3,000
gallons?
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Plus equipment.
And that barn that you lost was since 1929, I believe you said that when we were.
Yeah, well, parts of it were built in the 20s, and then there were some parts that we think were built around 1900. And so, yeah, that was really the biggest loss to us was the barn. I mean, the wine and the equipment, something we could replace much more easily, but the barn, we just can't get that old barn back. But we do intend to have a rebuild project here. And, we kept all the stonework, and we'll incorporate that into a rebuild.
And originally, I think you had mentioned that your plans were open like a banquet facility. Is that still the goal?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we'll have, a big, because part of the barn was a big hay barn, and so we'll have something similar to that we could use for a banquet facility.
Now, obviously, well, I wish I could say that that's the first tragedy that befell the farm on July 4th, but it's not. And it's not the first fire that's befell the farm as well. Can you talk to me a little bit about why July 4th is such a crazy date for you on the good and the bad?
So the house that we live in was built in 1929, and it had burned in a fire on July 4th the previous year. So we were told that, of course, it was a wood shingle roof, and we were told that they had fireworks that ended up on the roof and started the house on fire. So it was kind of an odd thing that two significant fires here. So, a lot of people say, oh, wow, July 4th, that's a bad day for you. And it was, but then the year after the fire, we had a grandson born on July 4th. And so we figured our fortunes had turned at that point.
I would say so. I would say that certainly would. So shifting gears back into the farm a little bit and back into the vineyard, obviously you have some very unique settings that are in front of you when you arrive, and the environment is very much, what you and I have talked about, you take very good pride in. What are one of the things that, if somebody were to visit Hillyland today, can you tell us what they would see or experience? The tasting room, what you guys are trying to build in terms of your expectations and experience?
Well, the thing that we hear the most from people is that it's very beautiful here. When you come down the road, it's a very bucolic scene. It's very quiet and peaceful. And when people come here, they really enjoy to just sit out there. It's very serene. They seem to enjoy the way that we constructed the tasting room. They say it's beautiful in here. We're very proud of what we've done with the tasting room and the area. And so that's what we hear most from people, is that they just feel very at peace and enjoy sitting and looking at all the scenery when they're here.
Awesome. Now you guys, when I visited you, obviously when we came out there last year, and I've been out a few times, we don't live too far away from each other. One of the biggest things that you seem to take some pride in is definitely that tasting room. Can you talk a little bit about the uniqueness of your tasting room and some of the pieces that,
Sure.
people tend to mention and take note of? Jerry, Doug, I don't know which one tells it better. You both have told me in different ways. So if you can share that with our audience tonight, that's some of the things that I took away when I visited.
Sure. So when we came here in 1970, this building was a 3-bay garage, and we used 2 bays as our workshop. We used to repair tractors and equipment in here, and it had a low ceiling and just a drop down set of stairs, and it was nothing special. It was just kind of an old ratty building. It has stone ends that are very nice. And so when we decided to do this, we took out most of the floor and opened it up so it had an open ceiling. We put in a spiral staircase and completely renovated the interior to give it kind of a warm country feel. And I feel like we've accomplished that. And, people seem to enjoy coming in and being in the tasting room as well.
So when you enter the tasting room, there are 2 other really things that stood out to me. Obviously, your bar top is one of them. And then your seating in there as well, I think is something that's pretty special. So you can talk a little bit about what those are?
Sure. So the bar top is made from some pine lumber that came from up in Sturbridge, Mass. There were some tornadoes went through there a few years back. And we have a friend who's a logger, and he was doing some cleanup work. And so he kept some of the big pieces and cut some slabs out of it. And when we got ready to renovate this and make the bar top, he gave some of those to us. And then a mutual friend actually put everything together to make the bar top for us. And so, it's nice that it has a connection to something significant like that.
Absolutely.
And the seating, we have a bunch of church pews in here, and they're from the Congregational Church in Meriden, the Central Congregational Church. It was built in 1872. They were renovating it. And so Jerry was looking online trying to find some farm benches or something, and came across those that a salvage guy, and he had taken them out and he was selling them. And so we were fortunate to find a whole bunch of them. So we have all light seating in here with the church pews, and it fits in with our history and trying to tie things to some of the historic farms. And then we have tables in here that are made out of old wooden cow stanchions. And so those are in keeping with what we're trying to do here.
Amazing. Yeah, it's definitely an experience. And for our audience members who have not yet had a chance to come out to you, I would urge you to do that. Not only do you get Husky hospitality, but you get a great experience and a great view no matter where you go there. I want to take this quick moment to offer out to all of you that are participating tonight. If you do have questions or things or comments that you want to share with Doug and Jerry, or would like to know a little bit more about the Vineyard at Hillyland, now is a great time to do that. You have a couple of different options to do that. Some of you are taking advantage of the webinar chat that we have on here, but you can also utilize the question and answer on your toolbar. Feel free to participate, jump in there. My 2 wonderful colleagues, Erica Glavacki, our Associate Director for the College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources, and Maggie Bascom, our Assistant Director of Donor Events, are both manning those right now. and fielding those questions for us that'll filter through to us. Huge thanks to them for doing that for us this evening. Obviously, this is a, by no sense, no shortage of saying it, this is a heavy load and it requires multiple hands, and thank you to them for doing that. So now's a great time to start pumping those through and getting those questions out. We're going to get switch gears a little bit and get a little more into the wines. So Geri, I think we can kind of head in that direction if you're good. Take us through the winemaking process. I'm sure everybody's dying to know if you and Geri are just in the back stomping on these grapes with your feet like, you know, you think that your Nana would be doing back in Italy. Is that what you guys do nowadays?
Well, I leave that to Geri. Her feet are a little bit nicer in the grapes than mine are. So, no, we do hire Lucy and Ethel, I guess, to come and do that. But
is Laverne and Shirley doing the bottling too?
Yeah. So it's all done right here. So we pick the grapes by hand. I always get some people to help us because it would be impossible for the two of us to do that. But you go through and you actually cut off the clusters. You know, you don't pick the individual grapes. You cut each cluster, and we have some plastic lugs that we set down, and so everybody fills the lug, and you leave the lug in the middle of the row, right under the grapes. And once the row is done, we drive down the tractor and a trailer and pick all the grapes up and bring them back, and you crush them that day. So you try to pick the whole variety in one day so that you're doing, you know, all those grapes at the same time. And so we bring them back to the barn, and we have a machine that's called a crusher destemmer. It's not very big. It's only, you know, a few feet long and a couple feet high, but you can do over a ton of grapes an hour with it. So it's adequate for what we do. So you dump all of the lugs into there, you have it set over a big plastic vat. And so it breaks open all the grapes and pushes them through a screen that lets them go into the vat. And it's, by going through that screen, it separates most of the stems out. So for the white grapes, we leave them in there overnight. We put some enzymes in, stuff to help break them down a little bit. And then the next day, we will press them. So you don't ferment the white grapes on the skins. So we press them and throw the yeast in, and you put them into a tank to start the fermentation. With the red grapes, we'll start the fermentation the next day also, but we ferment them on the skin. So we leave them in the vat and just put a cover on. It's not an airtight cover, and we throw the yeast in there. And for those, it's called a must with crushed grapes. So you go and you stir that up about 3 times a day. And so, yeah, Geri's saying because of the cap, because the grapes will float up to the top and they form a very thick cap. And so, and it traps a lot of gases in there. So you do that to just keep the fermentation moving. You stir that up a few times a day. And that'll take 10 to 14 days for the primary fermentation. And then we'll run those through the press and put that juice into a tank as well. And they'll continue a very slow fermentation until the process is complete. And we will, throughout the year, we'll rack both the red and the white. So racking is when you're pumping the wine off of the sediment. The sediment is called lees. And so you pump it off into another tank. And so it's it's almost like filtering, you know, you're getting all the solids out that way. And then before you actually bottle it, you will actually filter it. So it's a very involved process, and you're monitoring sulfites and, you know, the quality of the wine all along the way.
Sounds like it. Now, what's the time frame in terms of, say, you've harvested the grapes, you talked about it, you press it, you're in the primary fermentation, which you mentioned was about 14 days, then obviously the slow fermentation. When does it finally get to the point where you can actually enjoy it?
So the white wines, well, we pick everything starting early September. The varieties come at different times. So we start in early September, and we'll pick into early to mid-October. So the white grapes, they'll be ready somewhere around May of the following year. And the red, they take at least a year before they're ready.
Now, we've started to receive some questions from the audience, so I think this is a perfect time to throw those in here because I think we're talking about that and kind of alluded to some of that. We just answered one of those questions just now. But one person is asking, and I believe they must be tapping on a cell phone, but I'm guessing it's the terrain that they're looking for here in Connecticut. Are there any challenges that are here that say, and it kind of flows into the second question that came forward, Connecticut wines are very different than those that we find in California or other places like the Pacific Northwest or even in Europe as well. So what are the challenges that you would face here in Connecticut that aren't faced like in California, and what are the differences in terms of varietals that can work here?
So the biggest challenge that we have in Connecticut is the cold weather. So that determines, what grapes you can and can't grow here, because we don't have a long enough growing season to grow some of the traditional vinifera. So we, mostly we have hybrids. I mean, there are some places in Connecticut that can grow some Cabernet Sauvignon grapes or some Cabernet Franc or some other more traditional varieties like that. But for us, we try to grow some Cab Franc and some Chardonnay early on, and after a few years, we gave up on them and pulled them out because we never really got enough of a crop to do anything with. The other challenge besides the growing season and the cold weather is we have very high acid in our soils. And that's not such a challenge with the white grapes, because that's what gives you the crispness in the white wines, is that acid. But you don't want that acidic nature in your red wines, and so that becomes a bigger challenge. And so a lot of people will say, you can't find as good of a red wine in Connecticut as you can in California. I'm not sure that's necessarily true. You just find different red wines. And there are things you can do to try to mitigate the high acids, but again, that is definitely one of the most significant challenges to growing red grapes in Connecticut.
Sure.
And actually, Doug mentioned about a primary fermentation, but we actually do a secondary fermentation. It's a malolactic fermentation. So we introduce this malic bacteria, and that will change the malic acid to the lactic acid, which years ago you used to be able to get a Chardonnay that was buttery, and that was because they had done that second fermentation on them. We actually make sure that our whites don't go through that process, but we do it for the reds.
Interesting. Okay. And does it matter in terms of, I know that you mentioned Chardonnay, steel versus oak and that, how do you guys sort your wines?
I think that's all really just a personal preference. One of the reds that we do, we specifically use a plastic tank for that. But I guess I'll talk a little bit more about that when we're doing the wine tasting and the process for that one wine.
Okay. So now you mentioned this before, you planted varieties on your property. You started with an acre and then you continue to grow. How many vines do you have now? And I guess the follow-up that would be, how many do you need to be able to do what you do?
So we have about 3,400 vines, and we pick probably on an average 16 tons of grapes from those vines. And from that, we can produce between 12 and 14,000 bottles of wine a year. So for us, we're a relatively small vineyard, but it's a lot of work to do all that. And we also, one of the things that we're kind of proud of here is that all of our wines are estate wines. So all of the wines that we have, the grapes are grown 100% here.
And what varietals do you have on site? So
we have 5 white varieties and 4 reds. The whites are Traminette, Cayuga, Seyval Blanc, Vignoles, and Prairie Star. And the reds are St. Croix, Frontenac, Leon Malo, and what am I forgetting? Marichal Foch.
Very nice. Okay. Now, 3,400 vines, that's a lot of work. And I guess really quick, because I saw something come in, folks, feel free to jump into your wines as we mentioned before. We'll do a little bit more in the tasting. We've got probably 1 or 2 more questions we need to throw at them before we kind of get started. So feel free to jump in and we'll catch up soon. Pruning, I'm sure that that's not an easy process. It's just the 2 of you out there with a couple of clippers?
It's a very involved process. And early on, before we were open or even close to opening, Geri did probably 90% of the pruning herself. And so, she would go out there, you start in late March late February or early March. And so sometimes she'd be out there in her snowshoes and going through the vines, doing all the pruning. So it was a very monumental task for
Sounds like it.
one person to do most of that. But as things have progressed, we've been able to hire some labor, and we've just had to hire labor because now that we're open with the tasting room, we spend a lot of time in here and just can't be out there as much. So she's not as involved out there in the pruning now, but for many years she was the pruner.
Very nice. And really quickly, before we jump into getting started and tasting these incredible wines, you mentioned this earlier. You planted your first vine in 2007. So are the vines, were they brand new or were they aged before that? How old are the vines that are on your site?
Most of them were 2-year-old vines. There were some that were 1 year. And, when you get vines, you'd think it was something that didn't have any life in it. It looks like a stick about that long with a bunch of roots dangling off it. And, because they're dormant. And so, to look at them, if you weren't used to it, you'd think that it was not ever going to do anything. But you put them in the ground and they all come back to life. So. Sure.
And that's kind of what you and I originally talked about offline as well, is obviously the older the vine comes into play, how, like you said, after about 2 years, you could have some grapes coming and you could make something.
Yeah. So you have your first harvest. What's that?
I was saying, you were jumping in. I was saying, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So after a couple of years, you get your first harvest. It's a smaller harvest, that first one, but then after that, you get a full harvest. And so all the varieties have different yields, but you can get probably an average of 8 pounds on the lower side, up to some of you would get over 20 pounds to a vine.
Wow.
So it varies, but they can produce a lot of grapes.
That's incredible. And to your point, I mean, 60 tons sounds like a lot of grapes by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So folks, as we make our way into the actual tasting portion of this program, if there are additional questions, now is a great time again to type those into the Q&A section. We did have a couple more that came through. But Doug, I figured you and Geri would like to know this note that did come through. There is an attendee tonight who grew up in your house when she was age 3 to 11.
Really?
And so she's obviously experiencing this and feeling an incredible connection to your product. So I figured you would want to know that she's here and made it a point to come tonight and wanted to make sure that you knew that.
Well, that's very nice to hear. I hope that we get to meet her sometime.
Well, I think that's your official invitation for Kathleen. If you're out there listening, now's your chance to go in there and introduce yourself next time when you're in the area. So now moving into the actual tasting aspect, I'm sure that nobody's dipped into this yet. I mean, there's no way that somebody could let 4 or 5 bottles in front of them and not try it at this point. So appreciate your patience, everybody. And just to make sure that obviously we can take full advantage of the process here, Doug, obviously, if you can walk us through some of the basics of a true tasting and things that we should be looking for.
Sure. So when you do a tasting, so
and which one are we starting with? I guess
this is the Hillyland wine. So I'm just going to talk about the tasting first, and then we'll talk about the wines. So what you do is you put a little wine in the glass and you swirl it, and you're looking for a couple of things. You're looking for color, and if you want, you can put like a white piece of paper behind it if you really want to get a good view. But you're looking at the color and the clarity, and when you swirl it, it helps to bring the aroma out. So you're smelling it to see, you know, what things you can get out of the aroma. And you're also looking sometimes at the viscosity of the wine. You'll see as it runs down after you swirl it, it comes in little streaks, and a lot of people call it legs. And so more full-bodied wines have more legs to them, and a little more viscosity. So after you swirl it and you smell it, then you take a sip and you let that go, you know, across your tongue. And the first taste that you get, you know, that's, you know, on the front of your palate. And so you let that sit for a little bit, and then you take another sip, and you'll get something sort of, you let that sit, and you'll get something on the end of the wine. And some wines have a little long, it's called a longer finish, you know, they'll stay there longer on your palate. But that's where you get some of the subtle tastes out of the wine. So that's just sort of a general overview of how to do a tasting.
Great. Well, thank you for doing that. And really quickly, there was a question that did come in, and this individual indicates that they've been to your wine festival over the last 2 years and absolutely adore it, and they love it. And they're curious if the festival will be happening this year, or whether or not COVID has impacted those events at your vineyard this year.
Well, we haven't made a final decision, but I think it's highly unlikely that we'll be able to do the festival. It's something that we've done it 2 times now, and we greatly enjoyed it. And you know, the people that come out seem to have a great time, and we were really looking forward to doing it. But you know, we had 700 or 800 people here, and I don't think that's likely to take place this year. But you know, we're still waiting to see if anything changes, but it seems unlikely, unfortunately.
So in other words, if everybody loves your wine tonight, you've got 12,000 bottles of wine that you normally sell at that event, right? So you need to figure out a way to move those this year, right? So,
right.
All right, so everybody's been waiting. Let's jump in. How are we supposed to have our glasses arranged here? If we've got, and if you're like me, I'm using my trusty 1881 wine glass. How are we setting this up? What's the order that we're doing this tonight?
All right, so we're going to do the 3. So I know some people have 2 wines and some people have 4. We're actually going to be tasting 5 wines. We didn't have the 5 wines as an option because it wasn't an easy shipping option for 5. So we're gonna taste first the Hillyland and then the Clearview, and then we're gonna go through the tasting of the one that people don't have, which is the Briar Knoll, and we'll talk about that wine as well. And then we'll do the Chapman and then the Ridgedale.
Perfect. Well, let's jump in.
Okay.
Talk to us about the first one and what we need to know.
So we named all of our wines after farms to honor our agricultural heritage. And so the first one that we're doing tonight is the Hillyland, which is our farm. And so if people take a look at the label on that bottle, that picture is a picture of the farm that was taken in 1932 from up on the hill that's behind the tasting room. And that picture shows everything that was here at the time of the fire. So everything that you see in there is what burned down, unfortunately. But you know, there's a lot of stonework. We kept all the stonework to incorporate into a rebuild, and so we're hoping to have something very similar to that when we rebuild.
Sounds good.
And so this wine is made with Cayuga white grapes, and it's a very crisp wine. And actually, Jerry can talk about some things that pair well with it, and you know, some foods that would go well.
Right, so a couple of things. I did just take it out of the cooler, and that's not really what you're supposed to do. You want to take your whites out probably 15 minutes before you're going to drink them, and reds you put it in the cooler for 15 minutes before you're going to drink them. But anyways, Doug and I have enjoyed this wine many times. It's the grape that we have the most of, and it's kind of funny because we used to play cards on a Sunday night, and we would have this, our cheese and crackers, which it goes very well, especially with smoked cheese and salads and that kind of stuff. But anyways, we'd be playing cards and having a glass of wine, and we would enjoy the first one. I'd pour the second one, and I'd say, wow, it tastes better. And Doug would always say, the second glass always tastes better. And I said, well, there's a reason. It's because as it warms up, it really opens up. And so you get more flavors as your wine is sitting out.
Very nice.
So anyways, we enjoyed this with a lot of cheese.
Well, this is actually my wife and I. We always have a stash of this in our house.
So we'll go ahead and all taste this.
All right, so swirl and take a look and smell. What should we be smelling?
So, you know, it has, I'm not sure how to describe the aroma of it. I guess it has maybe a little bit of a mineral tone to it. But the flavor that you get is, there's a little bit of a grapefruit flavor on the end of it, on the finish. That's the most noticeable trait of the Cayuga.
And Cayuga grapes were designed by Cornell University, correct?
That's correct.
Now, would you describe this as a sweet or a semi-sweet?
This is a dry wine.
Dry one.
Yeah.
Oh, Jerry's going for her tasting notes.
No, no. That was a messy pour.
Very nice. Like I said, this is my favorite of yours. That's why I picked up extra when I came through this week. Folks, if while you're participating, if there are certain things that you're tasting as well and want to share that, the chat is a great place to put that, and obviously so you can communicate with some of your fellow Huskies about what you're doing, the environment you're in. If you're in front of that fire pit right now, enjoying it with friends, take this opportunity to connect with each other in that chat box as well and share some of that. It's a great place to do that and share some of your thoughts about what the wines that you're tasting tonight. I'm sure Doug and Frank will welcome that as well.
Well, you know, you mentioned that they should share what they tasted, and that's an interesting point, Josh, because, you know, everybody has a different palate. So even though, you know, we say we taste certain things in it, we find that a lot of times when people are in here, you know, they tasted different things in some of the wines. And so I never say that they're wrong because, you know, you taste what you taste, and everybody has their own take on things. I mean, there are some things that are very common across the board, but still everybody has their own take on what the wines taste like.
Awesome. No, yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, my wife and I taste different things, and we like different things. So it's always hard to find one that we can settle on. So it's funny that you describe this as a dry wine, because that's my style. I prefer much drier. I prefer the traditional red, the spicy reds, those the boldness, and she prefers the sweeter. So Cayuga's always been one she's been drawn to because it can have a sweeter taste.
Right.
One thing I always thought was interesting, and you may know more about this obviously than I, but Cayuga grapes are actually very bitter.
Yeah, well, it depends. So, you know, one of the things that you're trying to do when you're growing grapes and deciding when to pick is you're getting the sugars to a certain level. So, like all the grapes that we grow can be very sweet by the time that we harvest them. Because we're trying to get to a certain, the level of sugar is measured in Brix, B-R-I-X. And so the reason you're trying to get to a certain level of Brix is because that will establish your alcohol content. So usually if the Brix level, we shoot for around 23, and that will give you about a 12% alcohol content.
It's funny you mentioned that because a comment came in about the fact that it is only 12% alcohol, and you kind of alluded to this, but do you work to keep your alcohol levels at a certain piece and a certain check, and what do you need to do to make sure that happens?
Well, the key really is the sugar content, and so you shoot for a harvest, you know, of that certain level, but you know, you can't always get to that level depending on the weather and other conditions. So you can add some sugar to the grapes when you crush them to increase the sugar level to bring it to the level that you want.
Sure.
And of course, there are sometimes that you may have a sugar level that's too high, and you may have to add some water to it actually to bring it down a little bit.
Okay.
but you don't obviously want to add a lot of water because that changes some of the flavor profile as well.
Sure. Now, are there certain regulations that you have to abide by to make sure that it stays at a certain percentage?
As far as the alcohol content?
Right.
So, yeah, you have to, I can't remember now, I think it's like 15% alcohol that you have to do something different with your licensing. I don't remember for sure if there's a certain percentage where you have to have some different qualifications on your licensing with the TTB. But also with the alcohol content, when you get your label licensed, you have to send it to have the alcohol content tested. It has to be within 1.5% of what you say that it is on the label. So as long as you're within that range, then that's part of the process. I mean, there are other parts of getting the license approved, but you have to maintain it within a certain range of what it says on the label. So yeah, it's important then to know where you're going to end up with the alcohol content.
Okay, makes sense. Now moving on, as we move into the second one, one of the questions that did come in is, can you talk to us, which one's your best seller? I mean, these are your 85 wines. What is your #1 seller?
The Hillyland is definitely the best seller.
Very nice.
And it's my favorite also, but
comments coming in indicate that they agree.
But there's certainly other people who enjoy, and I enjoy the other wines too, but if I have to pick a favorite, that's my favorite.
So as we get into this one here, you kind of talked a little bit about this in the process, but what is your winemaking style? Do you have one that you kind of keep to, or do you kind of find yourself mixing and matching and trying new things? And how does that work for you?
I think it's more of a mix and match. I don't know as though I would, pin us down to any particular style. We produce wines that we like, and I don't really have that great of a palate, to be honest with you. I can tell you if I like the wine or not, but Geri is definitely the wine taster for us, and she's much better at picking up all the subtleties in the wines, and I certainly rely on her for the taste testing. But we have some friends and some of our kids who will also help us on, getting to the final result of how we want to finish the wine. Yeah.
Well, I know 60 new people that might want to help you do that the next time that you're up there. So talk to us about the second one. What are we working on now? This is the Briar Knoll, right?
Clearview.
Oh, Clearview. Okay.
So Clearview was my father-in-law's farm, Geri's father. And he had a dairy farm up in Woodstock, Connecticut into the late 60s. And you look at the label on that bottle, just a picture of milking cows back in that era. Unfortunately, it's not a picture of Geri's father because we just couldn't find a good enough picture of him on the farm that would work well on the label. So we found something that would be similar. And Geri's father is still with us today, and he obviously doesn't milk cows anymore, but he's got a place up in Woodstock. He does some bedding plants and things like that now. And this is made with Traminette grapes. So Traminette is actually a cousin of Gewürztraminer. And this wine has a very floral aroma to it. It doesn't have a floral taste. And you pick up some citrusy notes on the finish on this. And Geri can talk about pairing that with foods also.
Very similar to the Cayuga. I would happily have that with some fish, something light, salad. You don't want the food to overshadow the wine. So if you have a light-bodied wine, then you have to have lighter food.
So something like poultry or chicken, or in that concept, some seafood as well would pair nicely.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited to taste this one. I'm not sure I've had this one before. Immediately on the nose, you get that floral aroma that you talked about. Not as strong as a Gewürztraminer, but definitely.
Right.
Subtle. The floral kind of drops a little bit after the first initial flavor.
Right. And some people say they pick up a little bit of lemon on the final taste on this.
I could see a little bit of that. You know, it's funny, while we're doing this, and when we were getting set up earlier, I noticed it as well. The comment just came in, are you still selling your wine slushies? And I think if folks look to the right, or to your left, their right, they will see that they are still there. Were they on sale today?
Oh yeah, they were on sale and selling like hotcakes. So the slushies are extremely popular.
And do you use your own wines for that? How does that kind of?
Yeah, so we use actually this wine, the Clearview, in the white one. And in the slushy, it takes on a pear flavor because we buy a slushy mix, and it's made with cane sugar, green tea, and a little bit of cranberry. And we use the same mix in both of the slushies. So the Clearview wine mixed with that turns into a pear flavor. And the Chapman wine is the one we use for the red one, and it ends up with a berry flavor. And so, of course, they're sweet and they're cold and very
perfect
good
for a day like today. Excellent. Very nice. So while Jerry's grabbing the third bottle, the one that obviously we weren't able to ship out, let's learn a little bit about your preferences. I realize there's countless varietals out there. Which type of grapes do you like to work with the best?
So I would say, in general, I prefer to work with the white grapes because they're a little easier to control. The red grapes that we have, they just grow like crazy, and you know it's a lot of work to rein in the growth. So you know you do the pruning in February, March, and then and into April, and then the grapes will start to bud out in May. And so we have a trellis system that consists of a few sets of wires, and as the grapes grow, you train the grapes to grow into the trellis system, in between the wires. So you go out, you know, a couple times a week from mid-May until just about now. We're just going to do one more time of pushing the vines into the wire. And so you get them all in there, but of course they just keep growing. And so then you have to do what's called hedging. So we go through with some hedge trimmers, and you cut off all the growth that's sticking out the side. Those are called laterals. They're coming off the canes that you trained into the vine. But then the canes also, they grow out the top, and they grow 20, 30 feet long by the end of the season.
Oh my goodness.
If you didn't do something about it, and you wouldn't even be able to walk down the row. And so you have to be able to get through there to spray for diseases, and you also want to keep it open so the grape will get a lot of sunlight and good air. And so, like I said, the red ones, they're just a little more growthy than the white ones, and they're more of a challenge to prune and more of a challenge to keep up with the hedging. They have a lot of stuff that grows out from the bottom as well that you got to keep cutting off. So I definitely like the white varieties. Probably my favorite variety to work with would be the Cayuga. It's just a very nice grape to grow. You know, it has good production, and it's a nice vine to work with.
Great. Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
So what we've got next, right? What are we up to? Clearview?
So the next one is Briar Knoll.
Briar Knoll. I reversed it again.
That's right. So Briar Knoll is the farm where my mother grew up in Vernon, Connecticut. And they sold the property to a developer in the 1970s who agreed to keep the name. So now there's a condominium association on Route 83 over in Vernon called Briar Knoll. And that is where this farm was. And I know, of course, most people don't have the bottle, but the label on this one is a picture of an ice harvest. And it's just representing an activity that they did on that farm. They had a pond there, and they would go out and harvest ice and put it into the ice house because that's what they used for refrigeration back then.
Got it.
So it's just something to show that activity at that farm.
And what variety is this one made of?
So this is made with Prairie Star grapes. Now, most people have not heard of Prairie Star unless they've been here, because I think we're the only ones in Connecticut that are growing that grape, at least presently. And so this is what I had mentioned earlier, that we had tried some Cab Franc and some Chardonnay, and we pulled them out. Well, we replaced both those varieties with the Prairie Star. And we had thought when we got it that it would be a blending grape, but then when we made it into a wine, because when you're blending things, you actually make the wines individually and then blend them. You don't blend the grapes. So we made this into a wine, and we enjoyed it on its own and decided to just keep it as one of our wines.
Nice.
And so this is just a very nice, crisp summer wine. And you get a hint of pineapple on the finish with this wine. It's just a nice, clean, nice summer drinking wine.
Perfect.
So sorry the rest of you can't taste it, but Jerry and I are going to taste it.
I have one as well, because I was there and was able to pick it up.
Some other people stopped by too.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah, so there's a few people who have this, but
I get that pineapple immediately, like you mentioned. But again, we talked about it. It's subjective, and the easiest thing to do is when somebody mentions what you should be tasting. Like, oh yeah, there it is. I get it. I know exactly what it is. When
right.
you may not have even thought about that prior to, right?
It was funny. The first time we bottled this, we had, the wine goes into a big hopper on our bottler, and it's not open, but it's not airtight either. And so the aroma, it just filled the room. It smelled like pineapple the whole time. That's when we realized that it had that quality when we were getting ready to bottle it. We just hadn't really picked up on it so much. And then it's like, wow, it was just amazing. It was like full of pineapple.
Now with this variety, do many winemakers use this? Is this a newer variety? Has it been around for a long time?
It's been around for a while. I think it was developed back in the 80s out in Minnesota, but it's just, for whatever reason, it's not common around here. I mean, there are places around the country that have it, but
Sure.
It's something
very nice
that Jerry picked out when we were deciding what to replace those with. She read some things about it and said, well, let's try that one. So that's what we did.
The only instruction Doug gave me was no more reds. Pick a white. So that's how we ended up with this one.
Very nice. Well, while we move into the fourth wine, or should I say, the fourth wine or the third wine for those that enter the full 4-bottle piece, and while folks are doing that, folks, if you have any questions or any comments, this is a great time to put those in the chat box or in the Q&A. One question did just come in, literally as I say that. Are your wines available at liquor stores in Connecticut?
They are not at this time. Again, we're kind of a small winery, and of course, we had a pretty good inventory at the time of the fire, and we lost a significant portion of it, so that changed direction for some of our stuff. But if we have one liquor store here in Scotland that has asked about selling our wines there. So if we do start selling wines at a store, it'll be there first, but we just don't have a big enough production right now where we feel comfortable, putting it out into a lot of stores. But that may be something that changes in the future too.
Well, now folks can take advantage of buying wines by calling you and having a ship, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we can.
Folks, you're the first ones to take advantage of this. Doug actually set up that account just for this event. So hopefully, Doug, that's the beginning of many more orders coming your way.
Yeah, we can ship anywhere in Connecticut, no problem.
So, all right, we're moving on to our reds now. So this first one, this is the Chapman?
Right, so Chapman is another farm here in Scotland. It was owned by a couple named Hadley and Ethel Chapman. They had a small dairy farm here in town, just a couple miles from us. And they're both gone now, but their daughter owns the property and she rents land out to other farmers in the area. So the land is still being farmed. And if you look at the label on this bottle, that's a picture of the farm taken back in the 1940s. And, you can see the haystacks out in there, and the barn in this picture is still there. sits very close to the road up on Route 97. But, you know, it was a family that we've known since we came here in 1970. And so we're happy to honor them on the label.
Very nice.
So this wine is made with St. Croix grapes.
Okay.
It's a very common grape in Connecticut, and you know, in cold climates, it's a very hardy hybrid. And this has some similarities to a Pinot Noir. It's got some earthy tones on the front of the palate, and on the finish, it's got a little bit of a berry flavor to it. And so Geri can tell you what she does with this wine.
Well, it's a little bit light in tannins, which makes it a perfect wine to chill. So we do keep them chilled at all times. For a summer day, somebody wants a red, but they don't want something warm. But I do a lot of cooking with this wine. It's very good in like a beef stew. So your red meats, the earthiness really lends itself to it.
Well, when you mentioned Pinot, you know, one of the things that came to my mind was beef bourguignon, right? And you always use almost like a Pinot style, something light, something like to that effect. That's exactly what my head was. Is that something I should be utilizing? So we'll see what happens next time I do that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get this one started. Let's see how this one goes. So St. Croix, now that's, like you said, that's a very common one here in Connecticut. I know many vineyards do utilize that one. Was that a target when you started? Because I know you mentioned no more reds. Was that one of the ones that came out of this whole thing? You said that's one we've got to do because we know it works.
Yeah, that was one of the ones we wanted to start with, and it's a nice grape to work with. It's probably one of the easier of the red grapes to work with. And there are a lot of different ways that people make St. Croix into wine too. So that's something that we've certainly seen as we've gone, is that there are as many different ways to make wine as there are winemakers. So everybody puts their own spin on it. And, you know, there are lots of subtleties depending what yeast you use, you know, how long your fermentation is, and, you know, the soils that you have, they play into the flavors in the grapes also. And so everybody's soil is a little bit different. So that's one of the beauties in Connecticut of, you know, everybody's got their own unique wine.
So this wine was made in a plastic tank, and there was never any oak added to it.
Very nice. And this is the Chapman for those that are inquiring. I can see exactly how that would work if you chilled it just slightly. Very nice. I'm getting a little bit of tobacco notes from it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, that's me. So.
Well, but that's interesting to hear, you know.
Yep.
Tobacco.
Oh.
I can see that now that you say that.
Putting things in your head now.
That's right.
So a couple of questions while we were tasting this one. A couple of questions that have come in is, would you consider doing a rosé in the future?
We have a rosé in the tank that should have been finished a long time ago. Honestly, but just because
this isn't the same one you talked to me about last year, was it?
I'm afraid so. And it's just it's been a challenge to decide exactly how we want to finish it. We've tried a few different things with it, and we just haven't hit exactly what we want to do with it yet. Right. And so we're still working on making it what we want it to be.
Partly because Doug didn't like the color of it. It's kind of an amber color. And then I read in the newspaper that was quite popular. So now he's okay with the color. That one we've started, it's with Leah Millot, M-I-L-L-O-T grapes.
Yep, very nice.
You asked earlier about how I find the time. Well, unfortunately, I haven't found the time to finish that one up yet. So, but we keep thinking we're very close, and you know, we have the label ready and we have the bottles ready. We just got to put the finishing touches on it and get it in the bottle. But we will have a rosé hopefully very soon.
Well, it sounds like you have some folks that are itching to grab it. So
Yeah.
that puts lights a fire, hopefully, to get that one moving. Again, while we're in transition here, the next thing that's come in as a question, consider other great products like jams and jellies, and is that something that you could do with the wine grapes that you have?
Yeah, you can make grapes
I have.
into the jams and jellies. I mean, you have to realize that there are a lot of seeds in these grapes, but yeah, Jerry has made some jellies. They're very good. You just have to find a way to deal with the seeds. And so she can tell you about what she's done with that.
I made jelly using the cayuga, and it's a great jelly to give to kids because it doesn't stain your clothes.
That's very true. Good call. I have a 3-year-old. I might have to come and get your recipe for that one. So, all right, what's the next one we have here? This is the Ridgedale, right?
Yes. So Ridgedale is another farm up in Woodstock near where Jerry grew up. It was owned by a family by the name of Richmond, and they were also dairy farmers. And if you'll look at the label on this bottle, it's a picture of chopping corn one row at a time. So when you're chopping corn, you're cutting the plant, you're taking the whole stalk and cutting it into little pieces, and you're going to use it to turn it into silage, it's forage for the cows. And so you chop the plant and you pack it into a silo and it ferments. It's a different fermentation process, obviously, than the wine, but it's and it goes through a fermentation process and it stabilizes, and then it's a suitable feed for the cattle, and it will, as long as you keep it covered and keep the oxygen out, it will keep for years like that.
Very nice.
So back then, this picture is probably from back in the late 50s, and chopping corn one row at a time was replacing cutting it by hand, so it was fantastic innovation. But of course now they chop corn 8 rows at a time, big self-propelled choppers and triaxle trucks, so you wouldn't really even think it was the same activity if you saw it compared to this.
No, certainly.
So this is made with Marichal Foch grapes. So this is a little fuller body wine than the Chapman, and this is oaked with chocolate staves. So I mentioned earlier that we use a little different process for this. So we use specifically some plastic tanks for this, and they're made for wine, made for red wine, and they allow for just a slight bit of evaporation to mimic an oak barrel. So instead of putting the wine into oak, we put the oak into the wine. So these are the staves that we use. They're similar to barrel staves, and they toast these just like they would the inside of a barrel. And so you take whatever the requisite number of these would be for your size vessel, you put these into the tank, and that will impart the oak. And the particular staves that we use are toasted with a mild chocolate essence. So you get a hint of chocolate on the finish with this wine.
I'm guessing, Jerry, your next tip will be chocolate pairs well with this one.
It definitely does.
This one has a much longer finish than the Chapman.
Okay. And is there anything else that you would recommend besides chocolate? Obviously, I mean, everybody loves having a dessert red, with some of that. Is it milk chocolate, dark chocolate, white chocolate? What do you recommend?
Well, yeah, milk chocolate and dark chocolate. I prefer dark chocolate anyway, but it certainly goes well with dark chocolate, and it goes very well with with some steaks or some beef. It's a great wine with that.
Okay, very nice. And I'm using my giveaway from last year, if you both remember, our Uncorked at Hillyland last year. Everybody got one of these insulated travel tumblers when they attended. And unfortunately, we couldn't do that again, but maybe next year, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll all hope for better things. So we'll cheers to that. You're right. Definitely fuller body. Definitely get that chocolate. It's very nice. And you guys have had it how many times and you're still shaking your head? Yep, yep.
Yeah, that's the most popular of the reds is the Ridgedale. So, for people who really are red drinkers, that's the one that they'll gravitate to. And people who are, not sure on reds, they'll go more for the Chapman because it's a lighter red.
Very nice. Now, folks, again, that concludes the actual tasting portion of tonight. We do have a few more minutes, obviously, for some time for some conversation and for some Q&A with Doug and Jerry, owners of the Vineyard at Hillyland. So feel free to type those in there. And I see you all kind of doing that now as I'm seeing some notification flags pop up. But Doug, I guess one of the questions I have for you, and in this process of exploring wine and creating all these different things, what surprised you the most at this point in your winemaking process that you probably didn't expect going in?
What surprised me the most? I don't know. I guess the fact that we were able to, learn so much of it just by doing it. Jerry read a lot, and we talked to some other winemakers, but we found that, in general, the biggest way to figure out what you want to do with it is just to try different things. And so, we found that, as much instruction as people give you, or as much as you get from your book, you get the most from being out there and actively making the wines.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. A few questions that did come in. One of the questions is, are you open for outdoor tastings, indoor? Where do you guys stand in terms of business? When can people come to you?
Yeah, we are doing outdoor tastings. Our staff right now consists of Jerry and me. So when we're both out here, then we're happy to do outdoor tastings. As long as one of us is able to be in the tasting room, then so we've done quite a few outdoor tastings this season. And we're happy to accommodate people with that. We just can't, we're not having any consumption of anything in the tasting room.
Sure. So you're actually getting some kudos as well right now. There's a participant tonight that says they camp down at a campground down the street from you guys. And every time they do, they make it a point to come multiple times. So clearly you're doing something right. One of the other questions that comes in, obviously you talked about, you've done a lot of research at this point. Do you guys travel to other regions to learn more about the process or things that you might do? No, Jerry's like, nope, no time for that. I mean, with a law firm with 6 kids and the vineyard.
Well, we've certainly been around to lots of other vineyards in New England and New York. And of course, we always told the kids we were doing research, but mostly we were going off to enjoy ourselves and try different wines. But yeah, we have, we've been to places in, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York, and seen not only what their wines are, but, how they run their facilities. And, it's all good information that we took in.
Perfect. So another question that did come in is very similar to that. And you and I, the three of us, we talked about this earlier this week. Are you part of any winemaker organizations in the region, the Connecticut Wine Trail, the passport series? We mentioned some of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we're not part of the Connecticut Wine Trail, but we are participants in the Connecticut Passport program. I know a lot of people think that they are one and the same, and before we got involved, we thought the Connecticut Wine Trail and the Connecticut Passport program were the same thing. But the Connecticut Passport program is actually run by the Connecticut Department of Agriculture, and so we are part of that program, and it's been very beneficial to us in getting our name out there. And it's a great program for the people who participate in it as well, because there's no cost to participate. And you go to the wineries in Connecticut, and of course, it used to be you get a stamp in your book, but this year it's just an app on your phone. They had to modify it for this year. But, it's great because you go to all these other vineyards, you're tasting different wines, and you're also going to different parts of the state that you wouldn't necessarily go to for any other reason, but it gets you out and, you know, see how beautiful our state is and get to see areas that you haven't been to. And we found that because, you know, we did the passport program for many years before doing this, and that was one of the things we enjoyed the most, was just seeing different areas, and, you know, you meet a lot of different people and you enjoy all these different wines. And so we're very fortunate to now be part of the passport program.
That's amazing, and thank you for sharing that and giving a little bit more information. Question came in about UConn alumni discounts. Now, before you answer, I will make it known to everybody that all participants today, courtesy of Doug and Jerry, will actually get a coupon emailed to you that you can download, good for 1 use per, basically per registration. You get one free tasting or one free glass of wine, courtesy of Doug and Jerry, as just by being a participant in this, but you need to do that on site. I'm getting a notification that my speaker is having an issue. Are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Okay. Apologies if y'all are having a little bit of a difficulty hearing my voice right now. I'm taking a look at what my settings are doing, and hopefully it's working. So what I was saying, and I'm getting a note here, there is a coupon being provided to all of you, courtesy of Doug and Jerry. Doug and Jerry, give me a nod if you're hearing me.
Yes, I hear you.
All right. Just want to make sure it's all good. So it's good for one free tasting of the available wines, and it's or for one glass of wine on site.
That's correct.
And it is a downloadable coupon that you will need to print and give to Doug and Jerry. It is in the name of the person that did the registration. So you're only going to be able to get one. I understand many of you probably have 2 or 3 of you in front of a computer screen right now, but it is good for one tasting or one glass of wine. Last question that we have, at least at this point, and folks, we have about 5 more minutes if you have any final questions for Doug and Jerry. They are curious about, they love your schedule when you normally have food and music and things of that sort. Is that schedule up and running, and can you talk a little bit about that?
So we are open on Fridays from 3 to 8, and we have live music here every Friday from 6 to 8, as long as the weather is decent. And Saturday, Sunday, we're open from 12 to 5. So actually, last night we didn't have the music here. We postponed it until tomorrow from 2 to 4. But generally speaking, every Friday night from the end of May through the end of September, we have live music here from 6 to 8. And we have lots of area for people to come and have picnics. And, you know, there's picnic tables, there's places to set up your own seating if you want, and spread out and enjoy the music and the wine and the slushies and whatever picnics you want to bring. There's a restaurant close by that delivers also. So yeah, people enjoy their Friday nights. Great.
And one more question did come in, and they're curious about, did you teach yourself before starting the vineyard, or did you take viticulture, oenology classes, any of that?
So, you know, we're not very smart. So we planted the vines and said, okay, well, you know, we're going to make wine. And so 2 years later, when we started getting ready for the harvest, you know, we're like, you know, we don't know anything about making wine. So we took a 2-hour wine making course, and we talked to a local guy who does a lot of stuff with breweries, and talked to him about some basic sanitation things. And like Jerry had read a lot, and we bought a wine kit, which taught us zero, because, you know, with that, it's like, okay, you put in packet A, then you put in packet B, you stir this, you wait 2 days. It doesn't tell you anything about what you're really doing. So that wasn't much. So, you know, that's where we learned by doing. So we bought some yeast and some other additives, and we had a whole bunch of 5-gallon glass carboys, and we pressed a bunch of grapes and put them in the carboys and added our different things, and we had labels on everything for all the different things we were trying, and that was how we started making wine, and then we just kept learning from there.
And everyone was a home run.
No.
There are no recipes out there. You have to come up with your own.
Right.
So there are many, many yeasts out there. And so when Doug said they were labeled, so you have a carboy with this yeast, another carboy with another yeast, another carboy with another yeast, and trying to find out which one you like. And then hopefully you get some results before you make the next year's.
I would imagine that, yeah, that's challenging and frustrating, I'm sure, all at once. So Doug, Geri, we're getting a lot of comments in our chat right now. Huge amounts of thanks to you both from everybody, countless number of folks throwing their thanks your way, and lots of excitement to come and visit you now. There have been a lot of folks saying, we will be calling you to order more. So be prepared for those. That UPS account is going to get some use, I think, after today. So please be prepared for that. Go ahead.
We want to thank everybody for participating. There was, like I said earlier, we are really looking forward to the event this year, which we couldn't have, unfortunately. And even though we couldn't really interact with everybody that's participating, we still really appreciate everybody who had an interest in this and who participated in the tasting. And we look forward to seeing you for your glass of wine or your tasting here.
Well, thank you both. And to our audience, thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you and your families are all healthy and safe during all of this. This event was recorded. We will provide you a link in a follow-up communication once it's posted online. So that may be a little bit, but we'll make sure that it gets out there for you. So we know that you have 2 or 4 bottles of wine in front of you. So if you want to invite some friends and do some driveway tastings or some garage tastings, now you've got the opportunity. You know what to talk to them about, or you can just replay this event for them. And it's as if they're right there with you at that point. So we'll make sure that gets to you. Doug, Geri, from the university, from the Alumni Office and Foundation, we thank you both so much for being such active partners with us. It's fantastic been getting to know you both, even more so in this year. And thank you for sharing your passion and your love and your process and your vineyard. And we hope that everything goes well for you this season, despite the restrictions that are out there, and hope that everything goes well. And we look forward to the next time that we can come visit you.
It was a pleasure working
you.
with you, Josh. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
All right, everyone. Stay safe. Best to all of your families and friends out there. Don't forget, we're back in the Big East, so go Huskies, right? Hopefully there's some sports to watch this fall. And folks, we hope to see you next time at our events, more virtual events to come. So make sure you check out the Husky Hub, which houses all of our online events. You can find that by going to foundation.uconn.edu/husky-hub. Again, that's foundation.uconn.edu/husky-hub. Someone asks a final question. Doug, do you still ride a unicycle?
Yes, I still know how to ride the unicycle. I don't do it very often, but yes, I'm guessing that's from Dave.
It was Doug and Sue.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I don't know.
When I did my undergrad work, I had a unicycle, and I used to ride that around the campus. It seemed like an easy way to get around.
That's an easy way to get around? Boy.
Well, yeah, it was quicker than walking.
Oh, it was Dave and Sue. I apologize. I got a correction. I misread it. I don't know a better way to end on that note, so I will take our leave here. Again, Doug and Geri Stearns, thank you so much. The Vineyard at Hillyland, folks, make sure you check them out in Scotland, Connecticut. For those of you that's on the other side of Wyndham, just off of an easy way to get right off of Route 6 if you need to get there from many parts in the state. So we look forward to seeing you both again soon. And again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.